Okay, so you've got this deep learning project, right? The one you've been kicking around. And you know it could be big, but you're stuck on which framework to use. TensorFlow, Keras, PyTorch. Which one is the key?
It's huge picking the right framework.
Yeah.
It's like the foundation of a skyscraper. You need that rock-solid base if you want to reach for the sky with your project.
We're talking industrial grade AI tools here, so where do we even begin?
Let's start with the champ TensorFlow. Developed by Google, it's famous for handling massive data sets. Think billions of data points, the kind of scale that powers Google Translate, self-driving cars.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of data. But TensorFlow is not just about brute force, right? What makes it the go-to for real-world AI?
You've got it. TensorFlow uses a static computational graph. It's like planning every step of your model's design before you even start training. It seems rigid, but that's how it gets incredible efficiency and scales for real-world use.
So, like meticulously crafting a gourmet meal versus just winging it for dinner. Both good, but totally different approaches. But isn't that level of control, I don't know, overkill for someone just starting out with deep learning?
You're right, TensorFlow can be a lot for beginners. That's where Keras comes in. Think of it as the friendly mentor of deep learning.
Keras is known for being super user-friendly. What makes it so approachable?
Keras keeps things simple. Its API is intuitive, almost like cheating. Imagine building a working image recognition model with just a few lines of code.
No, that's what I'm talking about, user-friendly. So speed and ease of use, that's the main advantage.
Exactly. Keras is the king of rapid prototyping. Test ideas quickly, experiment with different architectures, instant feedback, and the best part, it integrates seamlessly with TensorFlow. You get the simplicity of Keras with the power of TensorFlow behind it.
Best of both worlds. But there's got to be a downside, right? Something this good.
Well, while Keras is amazing for a lot of applications, especially for beginners, it might not be the best fit for super specialized or complex models. Like if you need to fine-tune a deep learning algorithm at its core, Keras might not give you that level of control.
So it's the perfect starting point, but maybe not for pushing the absolute limits. Which brings us to our last contender, PyTorch. Everyone's talking about it. What's the hype about?
PyTorch, developed by Meta, is a favorite in the research world, and for good reason. Its strength is its dynamic computation graph. Instead of predefining everything, PyTorch lets you change your model's architecture on the fly as it's learning.
Wait, so you can adjust the recipe as you're baking the cake. That sounds incredibly powerful.
It is. This flexibility makes it perfect for research, constantly tweaking and refining models. And because it's so tightly integrated with Python, a language researchers love, it's very intuitive to use.
So PyTorch is for pushing the boundaries of deep learning, but how does it compare to TensorFlow when it comes to real-world applications?
That's the interesting part. PyTorch is catching up, but TensorFlow, with its years of experience and its robust ecosystem, still has the edge in terms of ready-to-go tools and deployments.
Okay, so we have three powerful options, each with its own strengths. How do you actually choose the right one for your deep learning project? So TensorFlow, the veteran, Keras, the easy one, and PyTorch, the researcher's favorite. How do you actually decide which one to use?
You got to think about your needs. Like, you wouldn't use a cleaver to make a fancy dessert, would you?
Yeah. Not unless I wanted a disaster in the kitchen. So how do these frameworks compare to, like, cooking tools?
Let's start with ease of use. If you're new to deep learning and want to experiment quickly, Keras is the way to go. The API is super intuitive, it's streamlined, very beginner-friendly, the chef's knife of deep learning tools, if you will.
So Keras is for quick experiments, trying out a new recipe. What about when you want to get more complex, need more control, more flexibility?
PyTorch is your tool. The dynamic computation graph means you can change the model as you go, which is super valuable in research. Like having a specialized knife for every technique, right? You have the control to create something really unique.
So PyTorch is for the cutting edge of AI. But what about TensorFlow? When do its strengths come into play?
TensorFlow is the workhorse, right? Raw power scales up incredibly well when you need to deploy a model. TensorFlow is the answer, like the equipment in a Michelin-star restaurant, all about performance and dependability.
And when you need your AI to work every time, dependably, TensorFlow is the way to go. But speed is important too. How do they compare there?
Both TensorFlow and PyTorch are optimized for speed. Both can use GPUs to speed up training. But PyTorch's dynamic approach makes it a bit faster for experimenting. TensorFlow, once it's set up, can be very efficient, especially at scale.
So flexibility versus pure performance. Anything else to consider? Community support, maybe.
For sure. TensorFlow and PyTorch both have big communities, tons of tools, libraries, pre-trained models. You'll find tons of support no matter which one you choose. TensorFlow's been around longer, though, so it has even more resources available.
So no matter what, you'll have help. But both TensorFlow and PyTorch are very good, and they're changing all the time. Seems like the differences are getting smaller. What's next for these frameworks? So deep learning is becoming even more powerful, more accessible.
Exactly. And the lines between the frameworks, they're getting blurry. TensorFlow is getting more dynamic, and PyTorch is improving its production tools.
So no clear winner anymore. It's more about finding the best tool for the task, even personal preference.
Right. It's less about mastering one framework and more about really understanding deep learning itself. Then you can use the strengths of each one.
So the takeaway is deep learning changes fast. You got to stay curious, always be learning.
Couldn't agree more. The future of deep learning is wide open. It's limited only by our imagination.
This has been a really interesting look at these deep learning frameworks. We've covered so much, from the basics to some really advanced stuff.
And we just scratched the surface. AI is always pushing forward. But you have the tools to build amazing things with these frameworks.
So to all our listeners, whether you're just starting out with deep learning or you're already an expert, remember, keep learning, keep experimenting. You never know what you might discover.
That next big AI breakthrough could be just around the corner.
And that's all the time we have for our deep dive into TensorFlow, Keras, and PyTorch. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, keep those AI dreams alive.